Well, hi everybody. So, are you getting excited about gardening for this year like I am? I am very excited about it, as I think you can tell. One of the things that I really like to do at this time of year is take a look at the Plants of the Year program for this coming year. These are programs that are done by either organizations or sometimes brands. And these are featuring plants that are tried and true things. These are things that they know will grow well and have merit in some way, which is why they are being featured. Now, this differs from new plants for the year, which you've probably read some articles about them or seen some videos about some of the plants that are coming out this year. And those are new and exciting. And don't get me wrong, I clamor for those as much as you do. But one of the things that's kind of nice about these Plants of the Year program is that there are a few aspects of this that, make it a little bit more approachable than some of those new plants. One is availability. These Plants of the Year programs, these are typically decided upon a couple of years in advance. So growers have plenty of time to get their growing and their production up. So if a plant is featured as a Plant of the Year, typically you shouldn't really have a hard time finding it. They make it a point to let growers know this so they can ramp up. There's also a lot more information about these plants out there. There is sort of a informational, educational element that these groups and organizations make it a point to push out there. So it'll be very easy for you to find out more information about these or learn more about some of these plants. And really the best thing about these is, again, going back to the tried and true thing. There's a reason these plants are chosen. And because of that, you have a better chance of more people knowing about it, more people having had grown this in the past. And that means you're probably going to have success with it too, because there's a lot of knowledge out there. So I'm not sure if I found all of the Plants of the Year that various organizations do, and I'm certainly not going to feature all of them here, but I am going to feature ones that are particularly interesting to me and hopefully to you. And we're going to start with sort of the granddaddy of them all, at least in my opinion, and that is the Perennial Plant Association's pick. Now, the Perennial Plant Association is made up of a wide array of people who work in the plant industry. And so this is growers and garden center owners and breeders and designers and garden writers and a large variety of people, but generally people who spend a lot of time looking for really good plants. Their membership votes on this several years ahead of time. And here's the criteria. This is why I think this in particular, this one is one to pay attention to. So here's why I think the Perennial Plant Association's pick is always interesting, because the criteria for something to be a Plant of the Year is pretty tough. So it needs to be suitable to a wide variety of climates, needs to be low maintenance, be relatively pest and disease resistant, has to be readily available in the year that it's being promoted, hence why this is voted on a couple of years ago. And then it needs to offer multiple seasons of interest. You can't be a one-trick pony and think that it's going to become a perennial of the year. So this year's Plant of the Year is Schizachryium scoparium, also known as little blue stem, and then they add in all of its cultivars underneath that along with the species. Now, this is a fabulous grass. It has multiple seasons of interest. Some of them have very blue foliage. It's generally an upright thing. It gets these beautiful sort of wispy flowers in it. If you leave it standing for winter, it has great winter interest. It's really a fabulous one and an easy grass to incorporate into your gardens. It's not something that's going to take over the world like some grasses can. It's very well behaved. Now, little blue stem is actually native to a large portion of North America, which is great, an added benefit that it's native in many of our locations. And it's one of these plants, this is a grass that you don't have to limit to just a sort of planting where you would anticipate grasses being grown. This will work in well into your perennial borders. Now, I'm going to put a link in the description to the Perennial Plant Association's website, and this is where they have specific cultivars recommended for different areas. But a couple of them that I think are worth noting are one called Jazz. Now, Jazz is nice because if you've grown the blues, Jazz is shorter than that. This is about 36 inches tall, which is a very approachable height for a grass for incorporating in many gardens. And it has this kind of silver blue foliage on it. One that I do have in my garden, I think I have 3 of them, maybe even more, in my garden is Standing Ovation. Now, Standing Ovation is interesting because it gets a wide variety of colors, including purples and blues all mixed in it. It also is said to stand up better to fertile soils. Now, a lot of times, if you run into a situation with a grass where a grass gets really floppy on you and you're like, what happened here? It's not supposed to be floppy. A lot of times that's because you're dealing with overly fertile soil. So especially if you're incorporating this into a main garden where perhaps you're looking for particularly fertile soil for some of your other plants, Standing Ovation might be a good one to look at because it'll still stay upright even if it's growing in fairly rich soil. Now we move on to Proven Winners plants of the year. Now, Proven Winners program picks their own Proven Winners plants in a variety of categories. And I'm not going to go through all the categories here. But the really nice thing about this is that you know that Proven Winners is going to be pushing these plants out to their garden centers. So if you like any of these, you should not have a hard time finding them. The first one is the Annual of the Year. And their Annual of the Year this year is Prince Tut Papyrus Grass. Now, this has been out for a long time. I've grown it. It's a fabulous little, it's a fabulous plant. If you've grown King Tut Papyrus, which many of us have, which is a fabulous thriller in a container or in the ground, that gets to be like 4 or 5 feet tall. Prince Tut is significantly shorter than that, and you see less stem. It's more about kind of the feathery foliage on it. This is probably going to top out at about 30 inches. They say 18 to 30 inches tall. I would say when I've grown it, it's gotten I would say it's definitely gotten up to 2 feet, 30 inches, somewhere in that range. This is a great one. The only thing I would say about this, and it works, by the way, it works so well in containers. Certainly you can grow it in the ground, but it's really, I think, at its best in containers. And what's nice about it, again, is that kind of feathery foliage that it has, which is a really nice texture contrast to many of the other plants that we grow. Now, keep in mind that papyrus is generally a water plant. So it will appreciate moist soil, but what's nice is that this has been bred to be able to coexist in a container with things like your supertunias or things like that. Now, I probably wouldn't put this in a container with a superbells because those like to sort of dry out a little bit between waterings, and this is going to like that consistent moisture. So I don't think you have to go overboard on watering this. However, your size will be dictated to a certain extent by the amount of water it's getting, so just keep that in mind. Now, Proven Winners Perennial of the Year is Paint the Town Magenta Dianthus. I have to admit to not being a huge fan of Dianthus, but the new Dianthuses that are out there are much better. They just keep blooming. They don't look so ratty when they're sort of half finished blooming. And I will say that there are some containers that were made with this, I believe in the town of Holland, Michigan, if I'm not mistaken, that I've seen, I think, on Walter's Gardens Instagram page. I'll see if I can find that picture for you. Spring containers, and they are just spectacular in that. So if you like Dianthus, this is a good one to try. Their flowering shrub of the year is Double Play Doozie Spirea. Now, I have not grown this particular Spirea, but I've grown some of the other Spireas that are in their Double Play series, and they are really fabulous. If your opinion of Spirea is sort of the plant that was in every big box store parking lot or at the foundation of every sort of builder landscape that was included with the building of the house, right along with like a Stella d'Oro daylily or something, change your mind about Spireas because they've gotten a lot better. So this one is one that blooms, either reblooms or will bloom consistently throughout the year, and I have personally found that to be true. This one, Doozie, has a really bright, fun pink color on it with kind of a darker green leaf. It should stand out really, really lovely. Spirea are also deer resistant. I personally have had no issues with deer browse on my Spirea. Your deer may vary, but generally speaking, they are deer resistant. And it's just a very, very easy plant to grow. It's just kind of, if you are looking for shrubs that you, because you're wanting to kind of make your landscaping a little bit more low maintenance, or you're looking to add more low maintenance things so you can focus on other areas of your garden, a Spirea and this one in particular would be a good call for that. Garden height for this is only tops out at 36 inches. So it's a very manageable size to tuck in. Now, we all know that Proven Winners has great hydrangeas. And so, of course, they have a hydrangea of the year. And this year, that is Little Quickfire. And I'm going to tell you guys, we're all taken with the limelights and the new ones that come out, and Little Lime and all these other things. But I'm telling you, we're all sleeping on this Quickfire series. They are particularly good panicle hydrangeas. I like them because they aren't quite as dense. The flowers are not as dense as a limelight. You know, with a limelight flower, like there is no space between those flowers. This is a little lacier and a little lighter and doesn't physically take up as much room. And of course, the Quickfire series, what that references is that they turn red early. So you get that great pink color. It's not a bright pink. It's a very nice kind of rosy pink that they get earlier in the season. I grow Little Quickfire and regular Quickfire, and I wish I had more of them. They're fabulous plants. So Little Quickfire is fairly little when we're talking about hydrangeas. It's 3 to 5 feet tall and wide. It wants at least part sun to sun. This is not a shade hydrangea that you're going to be looking for. This, of course, blooms on new wood, which is fabulous, in particular if you live in an area with deer. If you can keep the deer from eating the flowers off during the summer and spring, in winter it doesn't matter so much because they will bloom on new wood. This is hardy in zones 3 through 8, and I think this is one that would do really well in a large container. If you're looking for a hydrangea for a container, this could be a good one for you. Excuse me. Now, the National Garden Bureau does their Plant of the Year program slightly differently in that they don't name specific plants, they choose categories of plants. And they have a lot of them, including this year they've added a houseplant version on there, which is Peperomia, which I have no experience with and I will not be talking to you about today. But they have some other really good ones. So their vegetable of the year is salad greens, and I can't tell you how much I wholeheartedly endorse this. I believe that everybody should be growing salad greens. You can grow them in containers, in the ground, in a raised bed. Doesn't matter where you can grow them. If you don't have a lot of sun, they don't have to be in full sun. In fact, they appreciate a little bit of protection. And they're pennies, just absolutely pennies for loads of salad greens. I would highly recommend that everybody give these a shot, because once you taste homegrown salad greens, you wonder what in the world you've been buying the stuff at the store for. It is one of those things, much like a homegrown tomato, that has very little in relationship to what you can buy in the store. This is always the vegetable that I tell people to start with. If they've never grown a single vegetable before in their life, I feel like they should start with salad greens. And I'm so glad that the National Garden Bureau is promoting that this year. Their pick for annual of the year this year is Verbena. And I'm pretty happy about this one too, because I do love verbenas. I've been growing so many different kinds of verbena. Now, when you think about sort of the hybrid type that's been bred, that kind of trails out of containers, my number one pick for that is Proven Winners Royale Peachy Keen. Almost every year you will find that in my garden. I also like some of their blue varieties from that same series. Those, pound for pound, there is a lot of bloom for those, and they just keep going. But that Peachy Keen in particular is a very true peach color. It's not coral, it's not something else, it's peach, and it's beautiful. Of course, there are other verbenas that I also like to grow. Some of the Verbena bonariensis varieties are really interesting. Now, the species, of course, can get quite tall, probably 4 to 5 feet. I think it's a great tall plant to work into your garden at the front of the border to get some variation in your heights. And it's kind of an easy plant for that to happen. Do beware with it. It can be almost an aggressive reseeder in some areas. In our area, it barely reseeds, so it's not an issue. But I think once you get to certainly zone 7 and up, and maybe even zone 6, you do have to be a little wary of the reseeding issue. I don't find it a big deal to pick out what I don't want that's reseeded, but I think it's worth noting that, and some people have moved away from it because of that reseeding issue. Now, there are some hybrids of that which are generally sterile, so that's great. Now, Proven Winners has another one of those called Meteor Shower. There's a new one coming out, I think it's Proven Winners, called Cake Pops. There's another one out there called Lollipop. They all have this same general concept, which is, skinny stem, purple lilac kind of lollipop type ball on the top. Really fun for containers. That's my favorite place to use them. There are other verbenas like Verbena officinalis Bampton. Reseeded in my garden last year, could not find seeds for it this year, so they've been sold out at Select Seeds, which is the place where I usually find them. I'm hoping it reseeds again next year. Really interesting airy plant. Think of wiry stems with tiny, tiny, tiny little kind of elongated stems with little flowers on them. Exceptionally difficult to take a decent picture of because it's so wiry, because the camera wants to focus on whatever's behind it. So hard one to take pictures of, but worth growing. So many good verbenas out there. Highly recommend, if you haven't dabbled in verbenas before, this could be a really good year to do that. Their perennial of the year is Phlox. I mean, Phlox is a garden classic, right? It's also native to much of North America, so it's got that going for it. And Phlox is just, there's so many out there. Now, if you've grown phlox in the past, you maybe like old time phlox. There's a lot of issues with powdery mildew on those. A lot of what is happening in phlox is being bred to be disease resistant, so that's not as big of a problem. I would say definitely look for some of those new varieties that are coming out that really have that mildew resistance. It'll save you a lot of trouble. They do tend to be a favorite among the deer, so I make sure to keep on the deer repellent spray with the phlox because they do have a habit of coming along right when they're about to get really good at nipping them right off. Now keep in mind there's also sort of a ground cover phlox, Phlox subulata. There's a lot of those out there too, also being bred for better disease resistance and better color. You can get pretty amazing color on phlox. In fact, I just shared a picture recently from my mom's garden. She's got a phlox. I don't know what it is. She's had it in her garden for many years, so it's kind of an older variety. This is sort of eyeball searing pink. It is really bright, but there's beautiful whites, there's beautiful blues. You can't go wrong with a few phlox in your garden as long as you're willing to manage that deer situation if that's something you deal with. And the last one I wanted to talk about is actually a new plant of the year program that I found. I mean, I don't know if it's new, but I've never heard of it before. This one is done by the State Botanical Garden of Georgia. They choose 4 pollinator plants. They have pollinator plants of the year, one for each season. And I wanted to just highlight their summer choice, which is Pycnanthemums. This is mountain mint. There are many different varieties of mountain mints, all of which are great for pollinators. You won't beat it for a pollinator plant. It is covered in all sorts of pollinators all year long. It's also fabulous for cut flowers. It has a really interesting, I mean, this is not a flower that's gonna blow you away, but it's very interesting and it's a great accent in a vase. And it has kind of a silvery blue color to the leaves, so it's a great way to work in there. Now, mint, it's not truly a mint, but it's in that family, should give you a little bit of an idea of what it can do, which is that it can spread. This is not something that will take over your world, but I think you should plant it with an eye towards giving it room to grow. Don't expect to keep this thing in a 2 or 3 foot area. Plant it somewhere where you're gonna allow it to meander a little bit. And I promise you, you won't regret it because it's worth every bit of area it might take up, and it works so well with other plants. Most of these Pycnanthemums want full sun to part sun. You can certainly push it into part sun. They want good drainage, adequate moisture, but honestly, they're not that fussy. Once they get established, they're gonna go. Mine gets about 3 feet tall. Some can get a little taller, a little shorter than that. I think 3 feet tall is probably the average, and I love having it. I've moved it around the garden quite a bit because I like it that much. Okay, so those are some plants to be looking out for this year. You'll probably be hearing a lot more about them. You will probably see many of them in garden centers, but these are all plants that lots of people have grown and grown successfully. So you should feel comfortable investing in these plants and looking into these because there's a lot of great ones out there to discover. So if you enjoyed this video and you found it helpful, I would really love it if you gave it a like. It really does help the channel and I so appreciate it. In the meantime, hope you guys are having a great day planning your garden for next year. I'm really enjoying it. We'll see you soon.